Secure with all doors and windows firmly locked and barricaded. Police are slowly avoiding people.
What do mindless, rotting, gory zombies have in common with Jordan Peele's Get Out? Some could argue that both types of media were influenced by one small indie movie that came out in 1968, a little film called Night of the Living Dead. With a small budget of $114,000 and most of the actors being crew and producers, and on top of that, it has what I am sure is the corniest sounding horror movie title that you have ever heard. However, that does not by any means deter from the frontiers that this movie broke. This movie introduced a whole new representation of zombies that inspires hundreds of movies and TV shows that we love today. But more importantly, it broke the racial frontier by unintentionally sending a message of how many black citizens felt living in the United States. It had a black man in the leading role in the height of racial tension and the civil rights movement in the United States, and still inspires many black individuals working in the horror industry to this day. Let us set the table with the question of, where did zombies come from? The first record of the zombie myth comes from Haitian culture. In the 17th and 18th century, Haitian slaves thought that as punishment for suicide, they would wander the earth forever rather than returning to their African homeland to lay to rest. These beliefs ended up being infused with the Catholic traditions of the French and Spanish, who occupied Haiti. From there, the voodoo religion was born. Many Haitians started to believe that some people could bring back the dead as a sort of slave. Evil priests, known as witch doctors, were rumored to have risen some dead people as a means of cheap labor. Many believe that the zombie was the embodiment of how enslaved Haitians felt, doomed to work for eternity, where it felt like not even death was a real escape. Years later, a man named William Seabrook would bring the zombie to light in the US after a visit to Haiti, where he learned of a sugar plantation owner who was using zombies to get free labor. After seeing the zombies for the first time, he wrote, "The eyes were the worst. It was not my imagination. They were in truth like the eyes of a dead man. Not blind, but staring, unfocused, unseeing. I had a sickening, almost panicky lapse in which I thought, or rather felt, great God, maybe this stuff really is true. And if it is true, it is rather awful, for it upsets everything." When Seabrook returned to the US, he wrote a book called The Magic Island, where it gained commercial success. Over 500,000 copies were sold, and the popularity of the book led to a movie titled The White Zombie, directed by Victor Harplin. In the movie, a man must save his wife from a witch doctor controlling her and other enslaved Haitians. The enslaved Haitians are never pitied upon, and the focus is more upon the white woman the man has to save, his wife. The movie was moderately successful and would lead to other very popular zombie-related works of media due to the US occupation of Haiti, in which the US were fascinated by these zombie stories. The knowledge of zombies from Haitian culture led to some social prejudice against black Haitians in the US. Ideas that Haitians were involved in devil worship and human sacrifice began to spread even if those movies didn't explicitly depict it. And it was completely untrue, but at the time, colored people of Haitian descent were seen as savage, satanic devil worshippers. Then, the zombies went through a makeover years later with George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. George Romero was an indie film director who grew up in New York City until he moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania and attended Pittsburgh University in the early 60s. After finishing his education, George Romero and some of his friends put together Image 10 Production Company, and at the time, they only produced short films and commercials for local business owners. Eventually, George Romero and his friends each put in $10,000 into producing one movie. They titled Night of the Flesh Eaters. Yes, at this point in time, the first name of this iconic movie was about flesh eaters, not zombies. See, George Romero never saw his monsters as zombies. They were just that, humanoid flesh eaters. The name zombies never even in the script. People in the movie referred to the dead as ghouls or flesh eaters. It was the audience who saw the creatures as zombies, and this makes the creation of the modern zombie that we know and love kind of a happy accident.
Zombies, to me, were, those boys in the Caribbean who, do the wet work for Lugosi. And I thought I was creating a completely new monster.
This new creature would spawn a whole new subgenre, which would lead to other fan-favorite zombie flicks for years to come. The movie had an immensely small budget and very little crew. Still, Romero and his friends worked very hard to make the film as best they could, and many people had to pull double duty. Little did they know the influence this would have on the horror industry and the racial message that would be unintentionally interpreted. We cannot do that without talking about the man, the myth, the legend, Dwayne Jones. the man that played the resourceful and ever well-witted survivor, Ben.
You can be the boss down there. I'm boss up here.
On the surface, this movie is about a group of survivors hunkered down in a house during the zombie apocalypse. Dwayne Jones being cast unintentionally added the race angle to the situation. To say that Dwayne Jones is the first leading black actor would be a lie. Many other black actors were present, like Sidney Poitier, who won the Oscar for Best Actor just 4 years earlier with Lilies of the Valley, or Hattie McDaniel's role in Gone with the Wind got her the first Oscar ever to be awarded to a black person. Oscar Mintwix was the first popular indie filmmaker, much like George Romero in the 1920s to 1940s. Mintwix and Portier also broke the frontier of black people only portraying servants and slaves. But Dwayne Jones does have one of the first roles in his time that, one, defy the authority of the white individuals that he is with,
drag you out there and feed you those things.
created a whole new subgenre, and a role where people saw a social message on how black people were being treated in America. It is also worth mentioning that Dwayne Jones was not selected to make the movie more racially inclusive, but solely for his talented acting and his take on the character that he portrays.
Dwayne Jones, the actor who played Ben, was very concerned, and almost the only one who was concerned about his being African American. Little did we know, right? One of the producers, Russ Striner, and I heard the news on the radio that Martin Luther King had been assassinated. Now all of a sudden it was a black film.
Another reason for the interpretation of a racial message was the ending of the film. Despite all of Ben's efforts to survive, moments away from salvation, he is confused as a zombie and shot.
All right, Vince, hit him in the head, right between the eyes.
They then take his body and burn it along with the other zombies, and the images shown of Ben being dragged with hooks show a horrifying resemblance to the real-life lynchings of black people throughout American history. This was relatable to how many black people felt living in America at the time, mistrusted by whites, threatened with violence, and in the end, even if they did everything right, they only ever got an unfair ending. The ending also makes you ask, did the rednecks shoot Ben because of his color and act as if they thought he was a zombie? Or was this just a tragic mistake? A question that is all too familiar in this day and age. The fact that a movie in the height of the civil rights movement and the height of racial tension in America ended up being a movie about a black man in the midst of white people he doesn't trust is very progressive for the time. He commands them, he holds his ground, and defies their authority. A man quick on his feet and making smart decisions to hopefully ensure the survival of everyone in the farmhouse. He's a character you really want to root for and you want to see him make it out in the end. The film unintentionally sent a message to its viewers of how millions of African Americans felt at the time with the ending. And the fact that Dwayne Jones plays this character in such a likable way really sells home the racial commentary even if it's not intended in the film. Despite the film's success, George A. Romero didn't make any money, due to a copyright failure for one of his producers who failed to file the name of the film correctly, so the film went directly to the public domain. He was fired shortly after. Still, the impact of the movie is undeniable and still inspires directors like Jordan Peele, Rustic Cundiff, and actors like Tony Todd, Clarence Williams III, and Daniel Kaluuya. George Romero went on to make around 26 other movies, each with varying success. He died in 2017. And Dwayne Jones died tragically young at the age of 51. Night of the Living Dead was his only hit movie. Still, the zombie genre Romero and his crew created is still alive today, and many of the films in this subgenre do make some form of racial commentary as well, intentionally this time, like Blood Quantum or Night's sequel, Dawn of the Dead. Dwayne Jones was able to be part of a film that inspired hundreds of filmmakers in horror and beyond. A movie that gave us a new monster to play with. A movie that is well respected in the hallmark in black cinema history. A film which is seen as extremely progressive for its time in both the creation process and the film itself. A bit ironic that a legend that caused so much racial prejudice against many African Americans in the US ended up inspiring one of the movies that ended up representing a leading black man as smart, strong, and independent. Life has a funny way of coming full circle.